Well, welcome. I'm Roy Hensel, and I'm a former teacher and also historian, or self-proclaimed historian, I should say. I love Paducah. I've lived here in this area for 50 years. I'm looking at Sharon over here. We started teaching 50 years ago next month. Wow, that's amazing. But anyway, seeing Paducah's got so much to offer and so much history. About 5 years ago, I was walking down the street looking at some of the buildings and thinking, wow, I never noticed that before. It's just amazing. So I started doing some research and pretty more research. I've done presentations. I'm a Paducah ambassador as well. So I do presentations like I've done presentations about Oak Grove. And I do tours of Oak Grove too, by the way. It's fantastic people there, the dead ones. And I've done presentations of how different streets got their names and how that came about, and just many, many different presentations each year. This year I just did one on the early theaters of Paducah. So this was my last year's presentation on the early hotels of Paducah. So what I'm going to do is get started. All right? So some of you probably recognize some of those hotels, probably most of them, because a lot of them are still standing. Now, as Paducah developed into a river port, hotels for the guests on steamboats and later railways were vital. Most of the hotels, of course, were near the river. In 1825, the year McCracken County was formed, this I got out of the first court records of McCracken County. The city set prices for its taverns, which taverns were also inns, so you get an idea of the prices back then. So let's talk about some of these prices. We have breakfast and dinner and supper for 25 cents. Lodging, 12 cents a person. But if you're going to feed your horse, that's 12 cents a horse. How about a half a pint of whiskey for 12 cents? I don't know what they had about 12 cents, but anyway. Wine, a half a pint, a quarter. And look at this. To board your horse for the night, 37 cents, which is more than a person. So I thought those rates were pretty interesting. Now, in the first hotel built there was with a brick structure, and it was built in 1828, the year after Paducah was named by William Clark. That building was given a name, the Indian Queen, and as you can see where it was located, that street on the bottom, that's now called, it's a little bit confusing because this is now Water Street. That says Water Street. That was actually on the other side of the flood wall today. But the Indian Queen, the new hotel, just to give you an idea, is being built right up there. Now, Brian, is there a red marker I can push? Okay, then I'm not going to try to push anything. And right where you see the St. Francis Hotel, which we're going to be talking about, that's on the corner where they're going to be building some other things in that empty lot today. And then, of course, everybody knows the Bank of Louisville, better known as the River Discovery Center. That is shown there in this 1856 map. I'll tell you that building, built in 1843, the River Discovery Center, it's gone through floods, it's gone through fires, terrible fires in Paducah, right in that spot. It's gone through the Civil War, where they fired the gunboat right down the street and knocked out a lot of buildings down. But anyway, I'm not talking about that building anyway. Anyway, but you do see the St. Francis Hotel, and it boasted 18 rooms. Now, the first post office of Paducah was housed at the west end of the building, facing Broadway. Then the Civil War came, and there were changes. Now, during the war, the hotel changed owners. 12 more rooms were added, and the name was changed to the Continental Hotel. Now there were 30 rooms. After the war, Mayor Charlie Reed bought it, expanded it with 24 more rooms, and it became a great success, known as the best equipped hotel between Cincinnati and St. Louis. Now around 1870, the name changed again, this time to the Richmond House. Have you ever heard of the Richmond House? Maybe some of you might have heard of that. Yeah. Around 1870, it became that. Now for over 10 years, Mayor Reed ran it, and later took charge of the Palmer House, which we'll be talking about. Now, here is a ledger from the original Continental Hotel, but when they changed names, they crossed it out and put Richmond Hotel, as you can see there. And it said, it's a repurposed one. The entry says, the Buchanan's Dramatic Company, St. Clair Hall tonight. Now, St. Clair was located where Max's Brick Oven Courtyard is today. And that was on my story about the early theaters, because that was actually the first theater of Paducah, right there. We had a very interesting, come next year and I'll tell you about the theaters. Anyway, sometime between 1891 and 1895, the new proprietor remodeled the hotel at an enormous price of $30,000. Now with that, it was renamed the New Richmond House. They do that a lot in this city. Located still at 101 Broadway, there was a ladies' entrance at 113 Broadway. Mr. Louis Lagomarsino ran the bar, eventually building and running the hotel, later to be known as the Senate Hotel on 2nd and Broadway, and we'll be talking about that in a little while. Now, it was the showplace of Paducah, the Richmond House, or the New Richmond House, or the Continental, or the St. Francis, whatever you want to call it. Now, both Joseph Friedman as well as John Cuyler, who married each other's sisters, had their receptions there. And they went on to become millionaires in Paducah through their business of the whiskey distributors, which were at the other end of the block, which later on that building became some kind of shoe factory, I believe, at the other end on Jefferson. Now, in June of 1913, Buffalo Bill, William Cody, stayed at the Richmond while his Wild West show was performing in Paducah. And also, if you ever heard of Tom Thumb, and that's him with P.T. Barnum over there, he was playing at the St. Clair, and he stayed at the Richmond as well. 2 months after Buffalo Bill came to Paducah, he retired from showbiz. Maybe Paducah was too much for him, I don't know. Now, Jim Eads, who became the new proprietor of the New Richmond in 1917, he renamed it once more, this time to the Southern Hotel. Now, I'm not sure how long it stayed into business, but a newspaper article in 1929 shows it's still going, and that's after 71 years. Now, the old hotel met its demise in 1940 when it was demolished. Plans were being made to use that location, but it became an empty lot used for storage. So you see on the one on the right, it's just an empty lot, and some of those buildings were still on that block before they were knocked down. Because as you know, in the 1970s, everything was knocked down to make room for the Executive Inn. Well, of course, then it changed its location. And before construction, and the remains are now, of course, the convention center where we are out there. What is curious, and you can see what it looked like even before it was a well-known parking lot that you're familiar with, it's all overgrown there. But what's curious is that block, which was once, oh, I'm hitting the wrong, whoa, stop there, whoa. That block was once there, the Richmond once stood, is now going to be turned back into a hotel. So it's gone from a hotel to an empty lot with the promise of a hotel, then an empty lot for decades, and now a hotel again. So what was made way old for the old is the new, and that's the artist's conception of what the new one's going to look like, but I think they've changed it since then. All right, now the Palmer House. Have you ever heard of the Palmer House? Maybe some of you pre-1960 might have heard of that. Charles Reed, who we mentioned earlier, the former mayor of Paducah, was also a great hotel entrepreneur. He owned and operated for a time the Richmond Hotel, like we said. When it changed proprietors, he continued to live there until the rent got too high. So rather than pay the price, Reed decided to build his own hotel. So he gathered up some backers. They chose a spot on Broadway and North 5th, which had been a tobacco shed and also a livery stable. So you can see in his 1885 map, you can see where it says, can't read the name, Hobson and Company. That is, and by the way, that's now where the Four Rivers Behavioral Center is, just so you get your bearings right here.
The Palmer was?
The Palmer, right. Mm-hmm. The hotel almost had the first 2 floors complete, and then the funds ran out. And in this one, you can see over here, it says foundation for hotel, and then it says work stopped. So in this map of 1889, It stopped for a while. Funds ran out. It laid abandoned for several years. They actually had the foundation dug, and in the summer, kids would use it as a swimming hole. It would get filled with water and so forth. Of course, it probably had mosquitoes, and I don't even want to think about it. Anyway, but it was a miracle happened then by the name of a man named Elridge Palmer. Now, Mr. Palmer shared Reed's dream and put up $7,000. This is around 1890. That's a lot of money, $7,000. And that inspired other backers, including Paducah's millionaires, Joseph Friedman and John Cuyler. And they started giving some money as well. And because of his initiation of the second funding, the hotel was named the Palmer House. Now the contractor was G.W. Catterjohn and Sons, who, by the way, in 1905 would construct the present-day Market House. Now Mayor Reed laid the first brick. It had 109 feet facing Broadway and 162 feet on North 5th Street, and it contained over 17,000 square feet. That's a big hotel. The opening date was set April 23rd, 1892. Charles Reed, of course, became the manager. The cost was an astounding $135,000, with an additional $35,000 for furnishings. It contained 114 rooms and a bath on each floor. Not in each room. It had the latest technology for the day, hydraulic elevators and steam heat. Rooms were $2 to $3 a day. It had 4 floors and a basement for the steam boilers. Now the main entrance, or gentleman's entrance, was on North 5th, and that led to, of course, a billiard parlor, a bar, a cigar shop, a barber shop, and a newspaper stand. The ladies' entrance was on Broadway. Now on the ladies' entrance, an orchestra under the direction of Professor William Thiel played. The first floor boasted a reading room, a private parlor, and a large billiard room. Now the Illinois Central Railroad had a ticket booth in the building where guests could purchase their transportation at this convenient location. Next to the railroad office was the Stutz Refreshment Palace, as it was called then, featuring teas, candies, and soft drinks. The hotel contained a barber shop, and this is another map of it, this is an 1897 one, a cigar shop, a tailor shop, and as time went on, many other shops. So you can see, if you notice where the ladies' entrance is there on Broadway, separate but equal for the ladies and the gentlemen. That's the way it was back in the 1890s. Now, this 1901 Sanborn map shows the Kentucky Theater if you look at the left end of it there, and maybe some of you had been to the Kentucky Theater many years ago. And it was in the process of being built and shows some of the changes of the shops located there. Now, there were also gentlemen's steps on one side and ladies on the other side, which led to a large second floor dining room. Now, the dining room was especially famous for its orange pie and frozen eggnog and many other delicacies. Now, this is a Christmas menu from 1896. Now, some of the entrees included green turtle soup, baked little pig with applesauce, mallard duck and grape jelly, haunch of venison, young turkey, sirloin of choice beef, and many other delicious foods. Here is the lobby and an example of one of the guest rooms in the hotel. The ladies had a waiting room and a reception room on the first floor. Now, the Palmer Transfer Company took patrons anywhere they needed to go. This building would later be used for the Du Bois Drug Company on Jefferson, as it was right around the corner from the Palmer House. So you may recognize what it looks like today. You can still kind of see the arch there. Whenever you saw a building that had an arch like that, it was generally a livery stable. Now, after a run of 14 years, the hotel sold in 1906 to the Chicago Hotel Company for $185,000, including the Kentucky Theater. Now, in its time, that theater had celebrities such as Lillian Russell, Lionel Barrymore, and Will Rogers. Now, this is a mortgage bond from the Palmer Hotel. And it matured 30 years later in 1936. And you paid, I don't know what you paid for it, but it wound up, you got $500. And that was pretty good in 1936 in the middle of the Depression. So that paid off for you. Now, Charles Reed had the reputation of helping all in need. One story is that a man named Seward shot himself in the hotel. He left a note saying this, "For God's sake, give me a decent burial." Well, Reed researched and could not find any family for the poor man, so Reed bought a casket, arranged a funeral, got a headstone, and buried him in Oak Grove. Now, after Mayor Reed's death in 1908, Stuart Sinnott took over as manager. Now, Sinnott had also run the Sinnott Hotel 3 blocks east of the Palmer Hotel. Now, the Palmer House went on for decades, but finally, it met its demise as well. By 1959, when it was torn down to make way to the new business in Paducah, which was JCPenney's and Baker Shoes. They took over their location, and they opened in October of 1960. Later, after Penny's moved to the new Kentucky Oaks Mall, the store was converted and redesigned to the Four Rivers Behavioral Center. Personal opinion here, I wish it had been done a little bit differently, looked more conforming to the architecture of the street, but I wasn't the architect, so. Anyway, so that is the Palmer House. Now, the Hotel Craig and Hotel Oxford. Some of you might have been around when Hotel Oxford was still there. Some people have told me they used to go to St. Mary's, and they'd go from church to St. Mary's, and every time they did, they'd go right by the Oxford Hotel. Although maybe not as famous as the Richmond, Palmer House, or the Sinnott Hotels, the Oxford was a favorite place for many people. Now, once a private dwelling, then a boarding house, a large addition was added. Now, this is one of the Sanborn maps, and look at that's a private dwelling there. Now, look what the proprietor did when she bought this. Look how she expanded it. The whole block. Well, it received its name from proprietress Kate Craig, better known as Katie Craig, who was quite a strong woman. Now, her boarding house was on, her boarding house property was transferred to her from her husband in 1903. And then in 1907, she divorced him on grounds of abandonment. She ran the Hotel Craig and its annex, which was the old boarding house, until she sold them in 1924. Now, both the hotel and the boarding house now are today part of a parking lot that surrounds Paducah Bank on Jefferson. Now, I'm going to do that one more time. Let's go back. Now, you get your bearings where this is, right? Now, watch as it melts into where it is today. So as I point out, that end of it was the Craig, and the far end. By the way, across the street from where the boarding house was the Belle Louise, which is the Belle Louise today. So again, give you bearings on that.
Across Monroe.
Across Monroe, right. So, where was I now? Okay, the hotel contained 55 rooms. 25 of those rooms had private baths. Now that's really something, which was not a usual feature for hotels back then. It was described as being of stone construction with a broad front porch and 20 wicker rocking chairs and tall palms. There were many windows, and later on with awnings to ward off the heat of the sun, with each room being an outside room. The second and third floors were the sleeping apartments. Another great attraction, as was most hotels in the era, was, of course, steam heat. Now, we had balls, dinners, cotillions were there, and as most hotels of the day, there were apartments for permanent guests there, as well as transient guests. And it was billed as a family hotel. Now, Kate Craig, or Katie Craig, was better known for her hospitality, and the guests were in for a wonderful stay. The first floor, along with the offices, contained a writing room, several parlors, a dining room. The whole length of from, was that 5th to 6th Street, was all dining room in the front there. It was noted for its delicious meals. And to contribute to the freshness of the meals, Mrs. Craig had a large farm out in the country, and she raised the vegetables and all and brought them to the hotel. Now you talk about from farm to table. She was the top chef of her day. Now, Katie actually got her start, as I said, in that boarding house. And in this picture, you can see across the street from Monroe Street, that building, that's the Belle Louise today. So you get to know where you are. When the hotel expanded its business, her former boarding house became the Craig Annex, pictured right here. You could get only a room there, no meals. You'd have to go to the other hotel to get it, which is half a block. Then, on August 30th, 1924, Katie sold her hotel to Hughes McKnight, and that family kept it in their family for decades. The new Hotel Oxford, as it was named, opened to the public September 1st, 1924. The hotel became an impressive alternative to the Broadway hotels, as it was very accessible to downtown. Well, all you had to do was walk one block from again, you'd get to the Palmer, and yet it was a quieter location and less hectic. The centrally located Oxford advertised its rates as $1 for a single room and $3 for a double. Its slogan was, as you see there, small enough to know you, large enough to serve you. That's a good name, good slogan. 10 years later, in 1934, the Oxford got a facelift. It was remodeled both inside and out, a little at a time so the guests wouldn't be inconvenienced. The most notable change was the exterior, which received a stone veneer of 5 kinds of rubble stone and some decorative trim of Indiana limestone. The hotel had a suite on the second floor, as well as 25 rooms with private baths, all with private baths. The other 30 rooms had access to a general bath on that floor. There were many ladies, there was a ladies' alcove to be enjoyed with the beautiful wicker chairs and the mahogany desks. The Craig and Oxford hotels served its guests for over 6 decades until it finally succumbed, opening up to chain hotels and motels, and the need for a local downtown hotel was becoming less in demand. Then in 1966, the Oxford closed its doors for the last time, to be sold to become a parking lot. It was at the end of an era of elegant downtown hotels for most cities, and Paducah was experiencing it as well. And now I will say for Paducah Bank, because we got a good representative for Paducah Bank in here, Paducah Bank did not knock it down. It was a parking lot, and then they built the bank there. Now the Senate Hotel. Now you may recognize that building. That's still there, whereas the other ones we talked about are not still there. Throughout its almost 60-year existence as a hotel, it was called several names: the Lagomarsino, the Belvedere, the Senate, and the Griffin. Located in the northwest corner of 2nd and Broadway, the building still remains a very prominent and imposing structure on downtown. It started with the Merchant's Saloon, run by Louis Lagomarsino. Remember we talked about him over in the Richmond House in the late 1890s. Then 3 small units were combined in 1901. Note the whiskey over there. I put a little arrow there. It was served for medicinal purposes. The present building was designed by well-respected Paducah architect A.L. Lassiter, the same man who remodeled which is now Whitehaven back in 1903. He also designed the Fisher Mansion, you know, the most haunted house in Paducah, on 9th and Jefferson, as well as the Carnegie Library. Now the hotel opened on September 1st, 1902 by Louis Lagomarsino. And I can say honorably, Louis Lagomarsino's house, my daughter lives in his house now. So it's really unique. And his family lived there for 90 years, different generations. Built of yellow pressed brick, it was called by the newspaper of the day, the handsomest building in West Kentucky. Well, this is a page from the 1905 ledger of the Hotel Lagomarsino. Notice the crisscross pattern on it, and it denotes On the Bridge at Midnight Company. This was a drama playing at the Kentucky Theater that weekend. What's interesting is that the theater was owned and next to the Palmer House. And these actors, including the main stars, stayed at the Lagomarsino 3 blocks away. I just wonder why. It was billed as European style. Does anybody know what European style means?
Just room. Just room, no meals.
It means you pay for the room only, you don't get meals. Right, that's the European style. Now the American style is you pay for the room and you get the meals. Right. So the room and bath, since it was European, cost $1.50. And without bath, $1. So if you want to get a little dirty, you can just spend $1. 5 stories tall, the hotel catered to traveling businessmen. There was even an annex across the street, which is still there, for a spillover for guests. You recognize that building? Yeah, that was, if you ever notice, it's the same bricks that are on the hotel across the street. So that was used as an annex for them. Now, a fire broke out on the north side of the 200 block in October of 1903, and it caused great damage to several buildings. Former Mayor James Lang, by the way, Lang Park, you've probably heard of that, which is also Circle Park and all. Well, James Lang, he was in the hotel at the time, and he was badly burned and cut. Fortunately, the hotel, while sustaining damage, was repairable. And in a few weeks, it was back in service. Now, is there anyone from McMurray and Livingston here tonight? I invited them, they didn't make it. Okay. Well, they were so gracious, they gave me a tour, and they even took me down in the basement, and you can see some of the charred lumber that is still there from that 1903 fire. Anyway, in 1906, the hotel changed names and owners. Nothing surprising, is it? It became the Belvedere Hotel. And it wasn't named after somebody. No, it was named after the Belvedere beer, which was sold at its bar. It became a very popular beer in Paducah, being brewed by the Paducah Brewery Company. Well, the hotel was renovated to include 50 rooms. It was remodeled again, adding a glass canopy, which cost $2,500. Wow, 1908, that's a lot of money. It was an exorbitant price. In 1915, the hotel changed hands again. Mr. Stuart Sinnott leased it from former Mayor James Smith, who also happened to own the Smith Mansion, also called Whitehaven. Sinnott had his grand opening in 1916, and it became known as the Sinnott Hotel. When I talk to people today about that building, they say, oh, you mean the Sinnott Hotel? Even though it's not been a Sinnott Hotel for almost 100 years, but they remember the Sinnott Hotel rather than the Lagomarsino Hotel. Now, the hotel went through many phases after the Sinnott closed in 1932. After being empty for years, it was sold in 1951 and became the Griffin Hotel. But the Griffin only lasted a few years. It was closed down and sold in October of 1959. Now, here's a picture of the Griffin in the late 1950s. As you can see there, it's sold again. It was abandoned for several years before turning into a storage unit, as you can see in this picture, for a United Home Furnishings. It was used there until 1984. Then Paducah Blueprint and Supply purchased it. And in 1985, it became Paducah Harbor Plaza. Do you remember that one? It was there for a while. And it sold in 2010. Now, it was during that period that it was also the McKinley Antique Auto Museum. But finally, in 2014, it became law offices of McMurray and Livingston with a condo on the top floor. The law firm lovingly restored the building, there we go, to using as much as the original parts as they could. Here you see original tile, for example, which covers the first floor. The gate of the original elevator is there. And all that paneling that's on the second floor, it's actually made from old doors from the hotel. That was a great idea to refurnish it. Now, you can also see metal tiles, which are on the ceilings, the marble columns, and the decorative work on the concrete walls, and the beautiful semicircular window which overlooks the market house. Some of the original rooms are restored. This was one of the smaller rooms. And by the way, you see it has a little wardrobe chest as its closet. The lobby has been restored to its former elegance. Now, the Senate went through many changes in its more than 120-year history. It still stands proudly on the corner of 2nd and Broadway, a symbol of Paducah and its heyday of traveling salesmen and people coming in on steamboats and the rails. And it was, by the way, look at that top picture, the 1913 picture, and you might see little boats in the front there. That was the 1913 flood. Now, it wasn't as bad as the 37 flood, and it was in April. People would get in boats and just joyride up and down Broadway. And that's what those people were doing right there, ready for a joyride, I'm sure. All right, now, let's go on to the next one, the Hotel Metropolitan. Now, built in 1908, the Hotel Metropolitan is one of the few hotels built strictly for African Americans in an America of Jim Crow laws. How many here have ever been to the Hotel Metropolitan? A few of you have. You don't want to miss it. I mean, you'll have to arrange it for, it's not open just generally, but it will blow you away. Now, it was run for nearly 90 years by very strong African American women. For black athletes, musicians, even politicians, finding a safe haven and a reputable place to stay was very difficult in those days. Travel was risky, and many were refused food, lodging, and even subject to arrest. Maggie Steed was determined to have a place built and was able to get a note from Langstaff Orr for the construction of a hotel. Now, as you can see, this is Betty Dobson. I invited, she couldn't make it tonight, but Betty Dobson does an excellent job of portraying Maggie Steed. When you go there, she is Maggie Steed, and she takes you through the hotel like that. And Maggie was really something else. She was told to get her husband to sign the note, and she came back the next day with a signature, and the deal was done. However, Henry Steed never actually signed it. Maggie did. As she and Henry had divorced and he had abandoned her, she took out 62 notes of $25 each, and she was able to pay back in less than 6 years. And that's amazing. Betty Dobson originally would tell the story that Henry died, and I did a lot more research, and I found Henry buried in Oak Grove. And he died in the 1950s. So I think to her, when she divorced him, she considered him dead. Now, don't get any ideas here. Now, the hotel was on the Chitlin Circuit. Have you ever heard of the Chitlin Circuit before? Some of you may have. It was a safe communication network of the spoken word that would later be published in a book called the Negro Motorist Green Book. They even made a movie of it recently, The Green Book, simply better known as The Green Book. Now, Maggie was so proud that she ran a full-service hotel which was respectable and safe and a convenient place for the African Americans to stay in this age of segregation and discrimination. It had 11 rooms. Oh, I missed my hair out. It had 11 rooms and one with a private bath. A barber chair was found recently in restoration in a garage, so they must have had a barber shop there as well. There was also a block building on the grounds, which is still there today, which was used by the musicians for their jam sessions. It was painted purple inside and became known as the Purple Room. They're restoring that right now. And can you imagine, I mean, like B.B. King, I could go on and on with the musicians that must have been in there practicing. I would love to walk by there and hear them. Now, the Metropolitan became famous for many traveling African Americans, especially, but not limited to, famous musicians. Now get a load of this. Listen to some of the people that stayed there. It's like a who's who in entertainment of the 1900s. All right? So some of the more noted guests that came through the years, Little Richard. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to show the picture. You tell me who it was. That's obviously, it says Little Richard. All right? Who's that? First name is Pearl. Pearl Bailey. Pearl Bailey. All right, let's see if we can figure out this one. Well, never mind, it tells it. And that's an actual ad of him while he was in Paducah entertaining at the skating rink at 10th and Kentucky. Interesting. All right, what about him? He has a royal first name. No, not the Duke. Count. Count Basie, right. All right. This is a little more, let me get this one. All right. Chuck Berry. How about this one? James Brown, right. And remember, as we're doing this, all of these people stayed at that hotel just a couple of blocks from here. I'll give you a little hint on this one. Chubby Checkers, right, Chubby Checkers. Now, if you're younger than me, you may not get that. All right, here's another one. Okay, that's the other royal guy, Duke Ellington. Great singer, Mahalia Jackson, a future Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall. See, that's what I'm saying, not just musicians. Other people came there as well. All right, surely you'll know this group.
Tina Turner.
Yep, Ike and Tina Turner, both of them when they were both together. All right, one of my favorites. Ella Fitzgerald, yes. Another great one. Billie Holiday. You can't forget this guy. Louis Armstrong. He was discovered by Fate Marable, who was born right across the street from where the Hotel Metropolitan is. He was discovered in New Orleans by Fate. He was the first one to hire him. Now, you know this guy. He's in the middle, yeah. Ray Charles. And he signed that it's hard to see it, but he signed it to Betty Dobson because he was there while she had the hotel open. And here's another one. B.B. King, right. Also, they had the Negro baseball team came there, and of course, the Harlem Globetrotters. These are just, and I know there are probably more, but these are just some of the more famous people that stayed at that hotel, right a couple of blocks down from here. Now, down these stairs, when I get there, I just get a thrill and a chill because I think when I come down those stairs, I say, wow, down these stairs, holding this railing came all these well-known musicians who stayed there, those creative hands that played or wrote the great music of the 20th century slid down that rail. If only the rail could talk. And it's supposed to be haunted too, so maybe it does. All right, Maggie Steed was a strong woman who had a vision. And when she died in 1925, her son took charge of the hotel for a short time. But he was followed by another strong woman. Her name was Mamie Burbridge. She was the next woman proprietor. Now, Mamie, she was interesting. I found her gravestone there in Oak Grove. But Mamie was a cigar-smoking woman who put up with no nonsense. She kept, I love this part, she kept comic books in the hotel to encourage children to read. After Miss Burbridge passed in 1950, Lester and Olivia Gaines, the parents of Big House, Clarence Big House Gaines, ran the hotel. When Lester died in 1972, Olivia ran the hotel until her death in 1979. From then, the hotel was passed on to her sister, Nanny Strickland. I also found her gravestone. And then she ran the hotel until her death in 1996. So you see, for 90 years, it was run by very strong African-American women. They had to put up a lot. They were some amazing women. That's all I can say, amazing. By 1999, the hotel was condemned. But Betty Dobson, and I wish she was here because I'd love to praise her again for her, she saw the potential of the hotel as a museum. It was in such a state of disrepair. She feared that it would become the fate of Lincoln School, which was torn down. The Upper Town Heritage Foundation was formed and restoration started in 1999. By 2007, the hotel was restored as a monument to the brave and encouraging women who ran it, and a way for all of us to understand that everybody needs to be respected and feel welcomed. We must never forget that. Now the Ritz. And I will say that we do have two people in the audience I'd like to talk about. Freddie over here, who is a permanent resident, I guess, of the Ritz. Freddie, stand up. You know Freddie Hicks probably. Stand up, Freddie. And he's also he's very knowledgeable of the Ritz as well. And then the Chapmans, Jim and Melanie Chapman couldn't be here tonight for one reason, but their daughter is here. So I'd like Jenny to stand up. Jenny Bowen, stand up. They are, Jenny, yeah. What? Yeah, so I want her to be recognized too. They have completely restored the hotel. It is beautiful. As Freddie can say, you know, the apartments are fantastic, absolutely. And the ballroom, but I'm going ahead of myself here. Anyway, so in 1927, George Sauerbraum, wouldn't you love to have that name, Sauerbraum, opened the Charleston Apartments on Jefferson Street. You know where they are? They're still there. It was an immediate success. So he started construction of the Ritz Hotel that same year. The Charleston Apartments cost $350,000, and that was high-scale apartments in those days. And when the Ritz was completed the next year, his company had invested over $1 million in Paducah. 1927. Whew. Now, in February of 1928, the Ritz opened with great ceremony. Irvin Cobb was even invited for the opening on February 21st, but he couldn't make it. He would attend, however, the opening of the Hotel Irvin Cobb the next year. Special invitations were sent out for the grand opening and its dinner and a dinner dance. The public was invited to inspect the Ritz 2 days later. The Ritz was completely fireproof, and even the carpets and drapes were made to be fireproof as well. It was originally designed for 60 rooms, but while construction was underway, they changed their mind. The building was expanded in the north part to 40 more rooms, which gave the hotel 100 rooms with 100 baths. Yeah, as well. Now, Mrs. Sauerbraum, I should say, move it here, there we are, decorated the interior with her choice of carpet and draperies and furnishings. The hotel included a ladies' lounge on the first floor, which was a typical thing of hotels in that era. The lounge in the 1950s became a television room as well. As you can see the TV in the corner there. And that lounge is there, and the hotel rents out that lounge for different events and things like that. It's a very nice place. The lobby was elegant, with chandeliers of beauty and furnished with comfortable chairs, rivaling the larger city hotels. The basement, maybe you didn't know this, the basement included a parking lot garage for 65 cars. And so its patrons could never get wet if it was raining. Cars would even be washed while they were parked in the basement. Not from the rain either, but they could be washed. That was quite upscale. Now on the 6th floor, there was a beautiful ballroom. And I say was, it still is, which served as a dining room for special occasions. The room had, this is what blew my mind when Jenny was showing me this, it has recessed lighting in the floor to give the room, as well as the dance floor, a beautiful glow. A special French chef was brought in from St. Louis to give Paducans a continental cuisine. A beautiful promenade lined the top floor for a panoramic view of Paducah, and it is a beautiful view from up there. At times, an orchestra would play up there for a rooftop dance. Now, here you can see the ad for such a dance. And look at the times, from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Wow. The rooms were all heated with steam heat and mostly all the same size with arrangement. Some rooms had a single bed, some twin beds, and some were considered bachelor suites. That is, they had a roll-away bed for resting at night, yet concealed during the day to create a nice living quarter. The Ritz was managed by the Charleston Investment Company of St. Louis, but in 1939 it was transferred to Paducah natives Louis and William Berger. It remained in the Berger family until 1977. Paul Berger, William's son, stated, he told me this too, and he said, it was the hopping place to be. The hotel had 6 businesses on the ground floor, 3 facing Broadway and 3 facing North 22nd Street. Through the years, there were many businesses that occupied those 6 spaces, including a Piggly Wiggly grocery store, a barber shop, a beauty salon, G&O Pharmacy, S&W Green Stamps, and even the Hotel Ritz Drugs, where, if you look on the side there, you could purchase liquor in their drugstore. Now, during the 1937 flood, the first floor was inundated with floodwaters. The staff shown here in 1936, as well as most people working in all the businesses in town, they all pitched in to clean up the mess and get the Ritz back in business. A month after the flood, a banquet was advertised and the shops were back open, which was amazing. A special guest came during the 1950s. President Harry Truman stayed on the 5th floor when he was in Paducah. He had come to make a speech supporting some local candidates. Now, he had visited Paducah several times, sometimes with his vice president, Alvin Barkley. He also attended Barkley's funeral in 1956. But if you look at these comparing pictures, you can see the exact location today and where he was entering the building and what it looks like. This side of the Charleston apartments, by the way, is also. Now, then, in May of 2017, Jim and Melanie Chapman bought the Ritz. There are now 47 apartments with some 2 and some 1 bedroom apartments. All the rental spaces are full with various businesses. As far as I know, the last time I checked, there was a great Mexican restaurant on the ground floor, very authentic Mexican food. The Ritz is alive and well, thanks to the Chapmans. Now, our next hotel, you might recognize this guy, or you probably recognize that picture. Where's that picture? It's on the flood wall, right. One of the most prominent structures of the skyline of downtown Paducah is the Irvin Cobb. In its day, it was known as the best hotel in the western part of Kentucky. It started with an idea by Adolph Weil, a businessman from Paducah. Now, his family home, built in the 1850s, was located at 604 Broadway, which was the future site of the hotel. After working with the family's wholesale liquor business, Adolph ran the Three Rivers Distilling Company until Prohibition in 1920. Now, described in a 1927 newspaper as a Paducah capitalist, it sounds nasty now, but didn't mean it that way. He speculated in the hotel business. By 1927, he hired architect Walter Alschlager, who had designed the Peabody Hotel in Memphis to create a new luxury hotel in Paducah. So the Peabody Hotel and our own Irvin Cobb have something in common, the same architect. Weil sold the old family home and then constructed, and then constructed the hotel on the site. Bids were received and in 1927 construction began. Weil personally financed the project at the cost of $400,000, which in today's prices would be $6.5 million. In 1929, and you can see here it's still being worked on. In 1929, the hotel was completed. It contained a ballroom, a barber shop and a beauty shop, a dress shop, a few other specialty shops, the governor's suite on the 8th floor, a beautiful dining room, a cocktail lounge, a roof garden, and 200 rooms. The barbershop, which opened at the same time as the hotel, was located on the south 6th side of the building and had 5 chairs and a telephone station at each chair. You can see these were for businessmen. Now, this particular picture is showing where Paducah was celebrating its centennial. In 1856, we became a corporated city. We were a city way before that, but a corporated city in 1856. So in 1956, the men were growing their beards to celebrate the centennial of Paducah. Now, as I said, the hotel opened in 1929 with much fanfare. 400 invitations like this one were sent out for the opening with a grand dinner and a dance. Weil leased the hotel out to the Memphis Hotel Company, which also owned the Peabody. Now, opening night came with speakers as well. For example, Weil himself, Albert Parker, who was president of the hotel company and owned 6 other hotels, the architect, Walter Schlegel, if I can pronounce it correctly, he came there as well. Governor Flem Simpson, wouldn't you love to have that first name? Flem? Would you vote for that man? And of course, Who else do you think came? Of course, Irvin Cobb, who was a great friend of Weil. In fact, Weil once said that naming his hotel after his friend was of inestimable value, as he put it. Cobb was the keynote speaker, and he said this in his speech. He said, "From lobby to roof garden, there is no hotel on this continent or in the world more exquisitely designed." Of course, he had a little reason for saying that as well, though. Cobb reminisced about the site where the Weil home formerly sat. He said that it was at that site he learned his ABCs and literature, because Weil's mother taught him. He added this, "I was known as the second toughest boy on the block." He alluded that Mr. Weil was number one. Cobb had also, as a boy, given his first oration at that site when it was still a house. Now, Cobb's boyhood home was just a few doors down. It's where, and I think it's even changed since then, it was Minuteman Press when I did this last year. I think it's changed into something else now. Anyway, at 616 Broadway. And he knew his neighbors, the Weils, quite well. Now, Cobb was also one of several, let me get there we are, one of several guests to sign the guest book on opening day. Now, that's a rare picture to see him standing in front of the Hotel Cobb. Irvin Cobb right there. He was the first to sign the guest book. He simply signed Irvin S. Cobb, Paducah, Kentucky. Music for the evening was provided by the orchestra from the Peabody Hotel in Memphis. For the next several years, Cobb would stay and speak at his namesake hotel several times. The hotel became the focal point and meeting spot for many conventions, parties, and the likes for decades. This dance was the Tillman High School class enjoying their time at the Cobb. I don't know what year that was, though. Eating in the Cobb Hotel, formal attire was required. In warm weather, renowned orchestras provided music for rooftop terrace dances, and crowds would gather on the streets below to hear it for free. And look at this menu. Look at some of the prices on, let's see, broiled calf sweetbreads, butter sauce, $1.25. Oh, here, ham steak, $2.85. I don't know what year this was, but they had some really good prices. Half chicken, fried or broiled, $1.50. Gives you an idea of the prices there. All right? Now, Mr. Weil died in 1943 in his Cobb apartment. Yeah, he lived there. And his wife lived there as well. Their son, Henry, who later was a partner in Bradshaw and Weil Insurance, took over the lease. Then in 1959, Henry sold the Cobb to Associated Hotels of Chicago. Now, for many years, the Cobb was vacant. Then in 1972, a fire broke out at the Cobb with some damage, and that closed it as a hotel for good in February of 1972. Then in August of 1974, all the furnishings were sold to the public. Maybe some of you attended that auction. Eventually, the old hotel became apartments as it is today. Now, if one looks from Broadway up to the top of the Cobb today, or if you view the backside from Kentucky Avenue, you'll see a ghost sign that can still be seen with big block letters which says Hotel Irvin Cobb, a reminder of the Cobb and its glory days. I'd like to thank once again the people responsible for carrying out these legends who are still around today, and McMurray and Livingston and the Chapmans and Bowmans, and Betty Dobson and all of them. I'd like to thank them all, and I hope you enjoyed checking in to Paducah's past.